Yu-Gi-Oh's power level is about to be reset, and it's coming very soon. Because for the first time in years, it looks like Konami is actually lowering the power levels of new archetypes and new cards that are being released into the game. Both upcoming sets, Phantom Revenge and Burst Protocol, seem much weaker than what we've been used to lately with the past 2 years of just insane continuous power creep. But I don't think that's an accident. I think this is Konami's way of soft resetting the power level of the game. Let's talk about why Konami might be doing this, and what it means for Yu-Gi-Oh! Heading into 2026. So, ever since Power of the Elements, the game has been on a straight power climb. That set alone dropped Tearlaments and Sprite, one of the two most powerful archetypes in the history of the game. But it didn't stop there. The following set, Darkwing Blast, introduced Bestials. The set after that, Photon Hypernova, introduced the menacing Kashtira. Later on, Age of Overlord introduced Horus, and of course, the Sinful Spoils. Valiant Smashers introduced Centurion and Memento. Phantom Nightmare brought us Yubel. Legacy of Destruction brought us Tenpai Dragon. And by the time Infinite Forbidden rolled out with Fiendsmith, it felt like the power ceiling had completely disappeared from the game. And just when we thought the power level couldn't get any higher, Crossover Breakers released with Malice and Ryziel, Mitsurugi got added to the TCG, and of course the Justice Hunters archetypes Dracotel, Yummy, and of course K9. Every few months it's basically the same cycle. A new set brings in a new powerful deck, the ban list kind of softens it, and brings in room for a new, more broken archetype that is later on hidden in the ban list, and the cycle continues on and on. But now it seems like that pattern is finally breaking. Let's start off with Phantom Revenge. This is the next deck building set in the TCG, and it's releasing in the beginning of December. Like all deck building sets, this set also introduces 3 new archetypes into the game. But this time, they seem a little bit weaker than what we're used to seeing. If in the last 2 deck building sets we got Ryziel, Malice, Yummy, K9, and Dracotel, which was basically tier 1 out of the box, this set goes back to how deck building sets used to be. We got Heka Hands, which is a fusion-based illusion archetype that steals and uses your opponent's monsters as materials and more advantage. It's actually a really creative archetype that has a lot of interesting design choices, but still very low to the ground and doesn't really have a consistent win condition. We got Killer Tune, which is a synchro archetype that lets you perform synchro summons from the hand, kind of like what Dracotel did to fusion summoning, but with a lot of engine requirements and the lack of ability to sync with other synchro archetypes, and most importantly, the fact that synchros in the TCG are completely dead with Baron and Borreload Savage Dragon completely banned. This archetype doesn't seem super promising, at least not in wave 1. And then we have Enneacraft, which is a flip effect pendulum archetype, which is basically like orange chocolate, the worst combination ever. It lets you flood the field with face-down monsters and then flip them over on the opponent's turn, but with little to no win condition as well. These are obviously still wave 1. They did get an additional sum of support in the new set Burst Protocol, which we'll talk about in a second, but still definitely not enough. And in the OCG, they've been out for weeks and they haven't really been top in any tournaments because currently the older decks with Crossover Breakers and Justice Hunters, Malice, Ryziel variants, Yummy, Dracotel are all doing really well in the OCG still. This set feels like the older deck building sets, if you remember from Amazing Defenders with Pearly and Rescue Ace, which were basically unplayable in wave 1, but then became really strong meta contenders once additional waves of support came into the game. Which I really liked about deck building sets, but obviously they sold much poorly than what they do now when you have a fully meta tier 1 archetype straight out of the box. So is it possible that these archetypes are deliberately designed to be stepping stones for future support, like the good old days? Maybe. And the next core set, Burst Protocol, is set to release in February of 2026 and will be the first set of 2026 in the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. Now those first sets of the year usually tend to be hit or miss. Last year we had Supreme Darkness, which was okay, I suppose. It did have Mitsurugi in it, but other than that, it didn't really have much of anything else. But the year before that, we had Phantom Nightmare, which was actually an incredible set with Yubel, Snake Eyes Poplar, and Promethean Princess Bestower of Flame. So that set was incredible. So we'll just have to see which one of those first set of the year it's gonna be. But regardless, Burst Protocol seems much closer to the latter category of being a little bit worse. So, before you continue, Galzo here with an important message from the editing bay. Ever since this video was recorded, there have been 3 important reveals for Burst Protocol. The Exo-Sister support, the Rescue Ace support, and of course, most importantly, the new branded support. Now, the Exo-Sister support and Rescue Ace are really cool, but the Alba support might be meta-defining, to some extent depending on other ban lists. It doesn't really change the power level of the set, but it might impact how well it sells, which in my opinion will sell incredibly well. So keep that in mind, and let's continue the discussion. Here's basically what's inside. We got a new Synchro archetype that is a support for Medius the Pure. Medius already had a Fusion archetype with Archmage, then had an Xyz archetype with Dooms, and now it is getting a new Synchro archetype with, I think it's called Elven Notes. But again, for Wave 1, similar to Archmage and Dooms, it's probably not going to do a whole lot. And again, with the lack of TCG Synchro boss monsters like Baron and Warlord Savage Dragon, it's bound to do even less. We have Dark Lord support in the set, which actually looks really great, but Dark Lord's inherent problem, and I'm a huge fan of Dark Lord, and I'm gonna main this deck once it's come out. The main problem is that that deck is locked into fairies to Oblivion, which really restricts the way you can play it. And as you've been seeing for the past year or two, combining engines and splashing engines like Fiendsmith and Mitsurugi is what makes decks really good, especially in the TCG. Usually those innovations come from TCG players, and you know, Yummy Mitsurugi is a great example of that. So Dark Lord is really cool, really great flavor, but very restrictive as well. So again, not bound to do any splashes. The set also has Archfiend support, Magnet Warriors, Spring Ants, and Tri-Brigade, which is actually pretty solid support, and of course Rocket support as the main cover card of the set. A lot of really good callbacks, but nothing that seems out of the gate really groundbreaking. And we're also getting BES support in the set, which I'm not sure who asked for, but hey, you got it. And I think that crap is pretty much unplayable. Now, Burst Protocol is not out and not even fully revealed by the time I'm recording this video. There's about like 11 cards still missing, which are usually the filler cards at the end. And obviously it might come out and do a bit of a splash, especially if there's a new OCG Forbidden and Limited list soon, which there isn't. So we're just gonna have to see what meta impact it has, but currently the support it has and the new archetypes don't look as good as usual. So what's actually going on here? Having 2 consecutive sets with almost no meta implication, and we'll have to wait and see for Burst Protocol, but seemingly on paper, especially without a new ban list clearing out the top decks, seems like an intentional design restraint. Konami could be deliberately scaling things back to rebalance the ecosystem of the game and launching a new era for 2026 alongside Yu-Gi-Oh! Genesis, so that you don't constantly have that power creep happening like the past 3 years. And lower power level means, it doesn't mean bad decks, it just means decks that are more skill expressive than just combo tutorials, like we've seen with K9 and the Artifact Mjolnir lock. Rogue decks, or a variety of decks that can actually compete, which we had sort of a format like that in Age of Overlord, which had a lot of different meta decks competing, and sets that don't instantly devalue your existing collection every few months. So again, with Phantom Revenge and Burst Protocol, it seems like there is a long-term investment like Amazing Defenders. It might be a little bit riskier from a sales perspective, but with new potential full arts being released into the game, maybe that's a great counterbalance. So what do you think? Is Konami really slowing the game on purpose? Introducing full arts to improve sales, introducing Genesis to bring more players back to the TCG, but also rebalancing the game so they don't have to break the game every few months anyway. Either way, this might be the calm before the storm, and I think it's worth paying attention to. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to the video if you like this type of content, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.